Dad looked at me with contempt through the FaceTime screen. He spoke, his voice rough with anger. "How the hell did I end up with a child like you?" I answered with just one cold sentence. "Then consider that you never had this child." That was it. I hung up, blocked his number, and disappeared from their lives forever. Hey Reddit, I'm Delaney Harper, 33, living in Portland, Oregon. That sentence from my own father was the final straw after 33 years of being the backup kid, the one who never mattered. From that moment on, I went completely no contact with my entire family. What happened after that? Total chaos for them, total peace for me. They begged. They showed up in person. They spread lies. They lost everything they cared about while I built the life I actually wanted. Buckle up because this story is truly wild and the ending is exactly what it should be. If you want to know how far a family will go when they finally realize they picked the wrong child to throw away, stay until the very last second, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. It really helps the channel bring you more insane family drama like this. Now then, let's dive in. The first time I truly understood I was the invisible child was when my younger brother Preston turned 12. I came home from school that afternoon and found the entire driveway blocked by a shiny red BMX bike with white wall tires and Preston's name professionally stenciled on the frame. Dad had driven 2 hours to a specialty shop in Seattle to get it. Mom had baked a cake shaped like a dirt jump. Neighbors were invited. Preston spent the whole weekend doing wheelies while Dad filmed every second on his new camcorder. I was still riding a dented purple bike the neighbors had left on the curb 3 years earlier. The chain kept falling off and the brakes barely worked. No one noticed. 2 years later, when Preston hit 14, Christmas morning looked like a Best Buy had exploded under the tree. A brand new PlayStation 4, 5 games still in the shrink wrap, a charging dock, a headset with a microphone so he could talk strategy with friends online. Dad bragged to every relative for weeks about how he'd waited in line at midnight on Black Friday. My gifts that year were 2 sweaters from the clearance rack at Target, a pair of socks, and a $20 bill inside a card that said, "For whatever you need." Mom told me I was low maintenance. Like that was a compliment. Then came the big 16. For 4 straight months, every Saturday and Sunday, Dad and Preston disappeared into the garage. They dragged home a 1998 Dodge Dakota that looked like it had spent the last decade rusting in a field. Engine seized, paint peeled, interior smelled like wet dog. I'd be trying to finish homework in the basement and hear them laughing, music blasting, tools clanging. On the morning of Preston's birthday, they rolled it out front. Midnight blue paint job, chrome rims, new sound system thumping whatever song was topping the charts that week. Half the block showed up. Mom cried happy tears. Dad gave this long speech about teaching his son real responsibility and work ethic. Everyone clapped when Preston revved the engine and peeled out for his first solo drive. 4 months later, on my 16th birthday, Dad sat me down at the kitchen table and slid a monthly bus pass across to me. He said public transportation built character and taught financial independence. I thanked him, stuffed the pass in my backpack, and went to catch the 42 downtown. My bedroom situation was its own kind of cruel joke. Preston got the entire upstairs back bedroom, vaulted ceiling, huge bay window overlooking the backyard, walk-in closet big enough for a drum kit he never learned to play, and a desk he never studied at. I got the converted storage room in the basement. One narrow window well at ceiling level that flooded every spring and let in exactly 0 natural light. The carpet was that cheap Berber that never quite dried after the floods, so it always smelled like mildew and old socks. In winter, the pipes knocked so loud I wore earplugs to sleep. In summer, it was a humid box. I shared the bathroom with the water heater and the furnace. When the furnace kicked on, the whole room smelled like burning dust. Graduation season sealed the deal. Preston barely scraped through high school with a 2.1 GPA. After failing sophomore English twice and needing summer school for algebra, my parents rented the local community center, hired a DJ who played his favorite playlist all night, ordered custom banners that said Preston Future Rockstar, invited 60 people, including second cousins I'd never met, and paid a professional photographer to follow him around. Dad gave a 10-minute toast about how proud he was that his son had found his own path and overcome obstacles. The cake was 3-tiers chocolate with edible gold flakes and cost more than my entire graduation outfit. 2 years earlier, I graduated with a 3.9 GPA, National Honor Society cords, 3 partial scholarships, and acceptance letters from every school I applied to. My celebration was dinner at Applebee's with the family. Preston spent the whole meal texting his friends and complaining the steak was overcooked. Mom kept asking him what color comforter he wanted for the dorm room he would never actually live in because he dropped out after 1 semester anyway. The only person who ever seemed to see any of it was Grandma Eleanor. Every birthday, every Christmas, every report card that came home with straight A's nobody else acknowledged, she would find a quiet moment and press a small envelope into my hand. $50 here, $75 there, once a full 100. When I got accepted to college, she always folded it tiny so Mom and Dad wouldn't notice. She'd squeeze my fingers and whisper, "This is for you, sweetheart. You're doing something amazing and I see it." If Mom caught us, she'd roll her eyes and mutter something about Grandma being too soft. Dad would just change the subject like it never happened. Those envelopes were the difference between eating ramen for a month and having actual groceries some semesters. They paid for the graphing calculator I needed for physics. They bought the interview outfit that got me my first serving job. They were the only proof anyone under that roof ever gave a damn, whether I succeeded or starved. By 18, I had learned the rule I would live by for the next decade and a half. Nobody in that house was ever going to put me first. So, I learned to put myself first because waiting for them to notice was never going to happen. By 18, I had learned the rule I would live by for the next decade and a half. Nobody in that house was ever going to put me first. So, I put myself first and college became the proving ground. I enrolled at Portland Community College the fall after graduation because it was the only realistic path with the scholarships I had fought for, and the quiet help Grandma Eleanor slipped me every few months. Tuition still came to $2,000 a term after aid, and books added another $400 to $500. The first week on campus, I marched straight to the job board and took the first serving position that paid nightly cash tips, a 24-hour diner just off I-5. Shifts that ran from 6 at night until 3 o'clock or 4 in the morning, 5 nights a week. I would finish my last table, count tips in the break room while the cook cleaned the grill, drive home with the windows down to keep from falling asleep at the wheel, shower off the grease smell, set 3 different alarms, and be back on campus for 8 o'clock lecture, clutching the largest coffee available. Some weeks I lived on 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. I learned to nap in the library stairwell between classes because it was quieter than the basement at home. My classmates complained about being tired from video games. I was tired from carrying trays of pancakes to truckers who tipped in quarters and called me honey. After 2 brutal years, I transferred to the State University an hour north. Tuition tripled overnight. Scholarships covered roughly 40%, Grandma's envelopes another small slice, and the rest went straight on to federal loans. I kept the exact same serving schedule because rent, food, and loan interest don't pause for anyone. I'd sit in the back row of 200-seat lecture halls fighting to keep my eyes open, then drive straight to the restaurant. Pasted on a smile for 8 hours. Count tips at 2 a.m., study in the booth after close until the manager locked the doors, drive home. Crash repeat. For years after starting community college, I walked across the stage with a business degree, a 3.8 GPA, and $42,000 in student loan debt that still shows up like clockwork every month. Preston's college experience was an entirely different universe. The day he announced he wanted to study music, Mom and Dad wrote the first tuition check to a private art institute downtown without even asking for a brochure. Full ride tuition, fees, private dorm. He never used meal plan, monthly allowance for supplies and inspiration. Year 1, he decided he was going to be a guitarist. Dad bought him a $3,000 Les Paul the same week. Year 2, he switched to music production and suddenly needed $20,000 in software and studio gear. Year 3, he pivoted to graphic design because the crowd was cooler. Every switch just required another call to the registrar and another transfer from the family account. No lectures about focus, no questions about wasting money. 5 years and 3 major changes later, he walked out with a general fine arts degree that basically proved he had shown up often enough to collect a piece of paper. He moved right back into the upstairs bedroom with the bay window, set up his creative workspace, and told everyone he was working on an album that would drop when the stars aligned. Meanwhile, I was 24, living in a 500-square-foot studio where the kitchen sink doubled as dish storage, eating plain oatmeal for dinner so I could make the minimum loan payment, and sending out 50 resumes a week. Grandma Eleanor remained the single steady light. Every semester, without fail, a plain white envelope would appear, sometimes in my campus mailbox, sometimes slid under my apartment door after a late shift. $200, sometimes $3, always in 20s, with a tiny note in her perfect handwriting. Make sure you eat enough to keep that brain sharp. Love, G. Once, when I was down to $43 before payday and the power bill was due, she sent $400 and wrote, "Buy yourself something that isn't instant noodles this week, sweetheart." Those envelopes paid for groceries when tips were bad. They covered lab fees I couldn't squeeze from anywhere else. They bought the professional outfit that got me my first real interview. They were the reason I never had to drop a class or push graduation back another term. By the time I signed my first full-time offer as an assistant project coordinator, I had a reliable used Civic I bought with my own money, a loan repayment plan that would follow me for years, and the absolute certainty that every single step forward had been earned by me alone, with only those quiet white envelopes from the one person who never once doubted I was worth the investment. By the time I hit 33, I had finally reached senior project manager at a solid construction company downtown, paid off every penny of credit card debt from those college years, and was sleeping full nights for the first time since high school. Preston was 29, still in the upstairs bedroom, still working on the album, and had just proposed to Avery Quinn, a travel blogger with 15,000 followers who made a living posting sunrise yoga shots from places I could only dream of visiting. The proposal itself didn't shock me. Avery had been around for 2 years, and Mom already treated her like the daughter she'd always wanted. What did shock me was the group text that blew up my phone one Friday night in April while I was microwaving leftovers after a 14-hour day on site. Mom had created a new family chat titled Preston and Avery Wedding Dreams. The first message was a wall of text about the perfect venue they'd found in Hood River. A boutique vineyard on the river, string lights everywhere. Private chef, capacity for 150 guests. Deposit due in full to lock the date. $22,000. Then came the line that made me drop my fork. Since this is a once-in-a-lifetime family moment, we're asking everyone to contribute their share. Delaney, as the older sister, we're expecting $15,000 from you. It's tradition for the whole family to share the joy. $15,000, 2 full months take-home pay. Gone for a deposit on someone else's party. I typed back, "I'm not in a position to give $15,000, and hit send. The replies came instantly. "Mom, this isn't about what you can afford. It's about love and support. Preston, seriously, you make bank now. Dad, family helps family. Don't make this difficult." I explained I had my own mortgage, retirement goals, and emergency fund I'd spent years rebuilding. Mom shot back that Preston and Avery deserved their dream day, and I should be honored to help make it happen. Preston sent a photo of the venue at sunset with heart emojis. I stopped responding. All weekend the messages kept coming, payment links, budget spreadsheets, even a half-finished GoFundMe titled, "Help Preston and Avery Say I Do." Mom ended one thread with, "If you don't contribute, don't ever call me Mom again." Sunday night, my phone rang with a FaceTime from Dad. I should have ignored it. I didn't. He answered red-faced, sitting at the desk in his home office. Mom hovered just out of frame. Preston and Avery stood behind him like backup singers. Dad didn't bother with hello. "We need an answer tonight," he barked. "We're $5,000 short of the deposit, and the venue won't hold past Tuesday. Stop ignoring us." "I've already told you I can't give $15,000, I said, voice steady. "That's not possible for me right now." Dad laughed bitter. "You live alone. No kids, fancy job. What are you even doing with your money?" Mom leaned in. "This is your only brother's wedding. You got everything you wanted. Let him have this. I listed the facts one more time. 5 years of art school, fully funded, 0 rent at 29, truck still in Dad's name. Mom cut me off. He's an artist. He needs support. You never needed anything. The argument circled for 20 solid minutes. Every time I brought up fairness, they called it jealousy. Every time I mentioned money, they called it selfishness. Preston rolled his eyes. Avery looked at the floor. Finally, Dad leaned so close to the camera, his forehead filled the screen. His voice dropped to that low, dangerous growl I hadn't heard since I was a teenager. How the hell did I end up with a kid like you? Silence. My mother just shook her head, not even bothering to look at me again. Preston's mouth opened, then closed. Avery's eyes went wide. I looked straight into the lens and answered calm and clear. Then pretend you never had a daughter. Dad started shouting something else, but I ended the call. Blocked his number, blocked Mom's, blocked Preston's, blocked the wedding group chat, went through my contacts, and blocked every cousin, every family friend who might try to guilt trip me later. 17 numbers gone in 90 seconds. My phone buzzed angrily for about a minute, then went dead quiet. An hour later, a call came from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring out, but answered anyway. Delaney, honey, it's Grandma Eleanor. Her voice was soft, steady, the way it always was. I saw Preston whining in the family chat before you left it. I heard what your father said. You did the right thing. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. You don't owe them one damn thing. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. She talked for another few minutes. No pressure to forgive. No lecture about blood being thicker than water, just telling me I was strong, that I'd built something real, and that she'd always known I would. When we hung up, I poured a glass of wine, turned off my phone completely, and slept better than I had in years. That was the night the backup kid finally walked away for good. 3 weeks of perfect silence ended the night my phone rang at 11:30 on a Tuesday. I was halfway through a glass of wine and a recorded episode of some mindless reality show when the screen lit up with a number I hadn't seen in years. Jake, the manager from the 24-hour diner where I used to serve until 3 in the morning. I answered half expecting a wrong number. Delaney. Hey, sorry to call so late. He said, voice low like he was trying not to be overheard. Your dad just showed up here like just now. Stormed in yelling your name, demanding to know if you still worked here, saying you were having a breakdown and needed family intervention. Customers were staring. I tried to calm him down, but he got loud, started knocking over chairs. Security had to escort him out. He left cursing, said he'd be back tomorrow. I sat frozen, wine forgotten. Jake kept talking. I figured you should know in case he tries again. Also, a couple regulars recognized him from the description you gave years ago and asked if everything was okay. I just said family stuff and left it at that. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the wall for a long time. Dad hadn't set foot in that diner once in the 6 years I worked there. He knew exactly where it was because he used to complain about me wasting my life on the job. And now, 3 weeks after I blocked everyone, he decided to make a scene in the one place he knew would embarrass me the most. The next escalation came 2 days later. I was in a client meeting when my work phone buzzed with a new email from HR titled Concern About Well-Being. Someone using an anonymous Proton mail address had sent my current boss, my direct supervisor, and 3 team leads a long message claiming I was under severe emotional distress, showing signs of instability and possibly a risk to myself and others. It included screenshots of old private messages taken out of context and ended with a suggestion that the company monitor the situation closely. I knew the writing style immediately. Mom. She had found my current workplace through LinkedIn. One of my old coworkers from the diner still followed me. Mom must have messaged her fishing for information, then used the company name to dig deeper. The email went to people who barely knew my personal life. My boss called me in that afternoon, concerned but calm. I explained the family situation in the simplest terms possible. He nodded, said he trusted my work, and forwarded the whole thing to legal to handle as harassment. Word spread fast. By the end of the week, half a dozen coworkers I hadn't spoken to in months sent private messages asking if I was okay and offering support. Someone created a new Slack channel called Delaney Defense Squad, where people posted memes about toxic parents. My current manager blocked the anonymous address and added a note to my file that any further contact from family should go through HR. The backlash was instant and beautiful. Jake from the diner texted again a few days later. Dad had come back twice, each time more agitated, and security finally banned him from the property. Regulars who remembered me started leaving fake bad reviews for rude older customer causing disturbances. Mom's messages to former coworkers got screenshot and shared in group chats I was still in. People responded with laughing emojis and told her to leave me alone. One old server buddy even posted publicly on her own page. Some parents really think money can buy forgiveness. Newsflash, it can't. By the end of the first month, the harassment had backfired spectacularly. Instead of isolating me, it rallied everyone who actually knew me. Tips from my old regulars spiked because they felt bad. My current team brought coffee on tough days without being asked. Complete strangers who heard through the grapevine sent encouraging notes. Dad never showed up at my actual job site. He didn't know where the current projects were, and security there is tighter than a drum. Mom tried one more anonymous email to HR and got an official cease and desist letter in response. After that, the direct attack stopped. They had tried to paint me as unstable, and all they managed to do was prove who the real problem was. The peace that followed was deeper than anything I'd felt before. In early October, Grandma Eleanor left me a voicemail that made everything real. I just finished a long day of site visits and was scrolling through emails when my phone buzzed with her voice. "Delaney, honey, it's me. I need to see you. There's something important about your brother's wedding I think you should know. Call me when you can." No urgency in her tone, but the words landed heavy. We met for coffee the next afternoon at a quiet spot in Beaverton, away from any family ears. She didn't waste time on small talk. Over 2 lattes, she laid it all out. She'd met with Avery's parents, Richard and Susan Quinn, the week before. They'd reached out after the engagement announcement, wanting to meet the family. Grandma had gone alone because Mom was too busy with planning and Dad had work. Over lunch at their Seattle home, the conversation had turned to family dynamics, and Grandma couldn't stay quiet anymore. She pulled a folder from her purse and slid it across the table. Inside were photocopies of old tuition statements from Preston's art school. 5 years of full payments, major changes, equipment purchases, all in Dad's name. Next to them were screenshots of text threads. Mom gushing over Preston's talent. Dad praising his creativity. The same messages I'd seen 100 times but never saved. Grandma had kept everything dated and organized. I told them the truth. She said simply about how your parents poured every resource into Preston while you built everything yourself. They didn't say much right then, but I saw the looks they exchanged. The Quinns, it turned out, came from old Seattle money, third-generation real estate developers with a family tradition of equal treatment and self-reliance. Their daughter marrying into a family with that kind of imbalance didn't sit right. They started asking questions quietly, starting with Preston. A week after Grandma's lunch, Susan Quinn called Avery's phone and asked for a casual chat about finances. Preston, thinking it was just wedding talk, handed over his credit report without a second thought. What they found was $18,000 in revolving debt, maxed out cards from creative purchases, late fees, minimum payments only. The truck Dad co-signed, 2 years behind on insurance. The album fund half spent on festivals he never attended. Richard Quinn didn't yell or threaten. He just looked at Preston across the table and said, "Son, we don't build empires on debt and excuses." They gave Avery an ultimatum. Postpone the wedding indefinitely until Preston showed real stability. She chose her family's values over the fairy tale. By the end of September, the engagement was off, the Hood River deposit refunded, minus a $5,000 penalty, and Avery moved back to Seattle. Preston was gutted. For the first time in his life, the golden path had a dead end. He couldn't stay in the upstairs bedroom anymore. Mom and Dad suggested the basement, but even that felt like a demotion. He packed in a weekend, rented a studio apartment on the east side with a roommate he found on Craigslist, and took the first job that didn't require a portfolio, entry-level accounting clerk at a small firm. 9 to 5 spreadsheets, no creative freedom, salary just enough to cover rent and the minimum on his cards. The deposit penalty. He's still paying it off monthly. The fallout didn't stop with him. Dad's golf group, the same one he'd played with every Saturday for 20 years, started pulling away. It began with whispers after he showed up one morning, still fuming from the wedding cancellation, ranting to anyone who would listen about ungrateful kids and family betrayal. By the third hole, he was yelling at a missed putt, throwing his club, scaring the groundskeeper. The group chat went silent. 2 weeks later, the organizer called and said they were restructuring memberships and Dad wouldn't be included anymore. No one returned his calls after that. Mom's volunteer work at the Lutheran church, where she'd organized bake sales and Sunday school for 15 years, dried up fast. Someone in the women's group had heard the full story from a mutual friend. Grandma's lunch with the Quinns leaked through Seattle connections. The pastor pulled her aside after service one Sunday and suggested she reflect on family priorities before leading any more committees. By November, her name was off the volunteer roster entirely. She stopped going altogether. The business took a hit, too. Harper Financial Services. The small accounting firm Dad and Mom ran out of their homes started losing clients. Word spread in the tight-knit Portland business community. The owners who preached fiscal responsibility had a son in debt up to his ears and a daughter they'd alienated over money. 2 long-term clients switched firms. Referrals dried up. Dad posted vague LinkedIn updates about challenging times, but the damage was done. Grandma watched it all from a distance, never gloating, just sending me the occasional text. They're learning now what you've known for years. She never asked me to reach out. Never suggested forgiveness. She just let the consequences do their work. By year's end, the family that had chosen favorites was left with no one choosing them. Last month, I turned 33, and for the first time in my life, I threw a party that was actually mine. 2 weeks earlier, my boss had called me into the office and handed me the new business cards. Senior Project Manager. My name in bold, the title I'd been working towards since my first internship. That same week, the final student loan payment cleared. $42,000 gone. I stared at the zero balance on the screen and felt something lift I didn't even know I'd been carrying. So, I booked the private room at the rooftop restaurant in the Pearl District I'd always wanted to try. 40 invitations went out to people who had seen me at my lowest and never once looked away. Old diner coworkers who covered my shifts when I had exams. Teammates who brought coffee on days I was running on fumes. Friends who listened to every ugly detail without telling me to just forgive. No family group chat. No obligation invites. Just the people who chose me when I had nothing to offer but exhaustion and determination. The night arrived warm and clear, string lights glowing over the city skyline. Everyone showed up in dresses and button-downs, laughing as they found their names on the little place cards I'd printed myself. The menu was whatever I wanted. Steak, fresh salmon, the good wine, no budget talks, no guilt. Someone brought a playlist of songs from my college years. Another person made a slideshow of photos from job sites and late-night study sessions. Laughter echoed off the brick walls. Grandma Eleanor was the only blood relative on the guest list. She arrived in her Sunday best, silver hair perfect, clutching a small gift bag. When it was time for toasts, she stood up without being asked, glass of sparkling cider in hand, and the room quieted instantly. I've watched this girl fight for everything she has since she was old enough to understand the world wasn't fair. She began, voice steady. I've seen her work until her hands shook, study until her eyes burned, and still find a way to smile the next morning. Tonight, you're all here because you saw the same thing I did. A woman who never quit on herself. This right here is the real family of my granddaughter. Thank you for choosing her when others didn't. She raised her glass. 40 people raised theirs back. A few eyes were wet, including mine. We ate. We danced on the small patio. We took 100 photos under the lights. Someone wheeled out a cake with 33 and debt-free written in icing. I cut the first slice while everyone sang off-key and loud. Grandma sat at the head table beside me, squeezing my hand every few minutes like she still couldn't believe the room was full of love instead of lectures. Not one Harper showed up. No surprise texts, no last-minute guilt trips, no angry voicemails. The next day, Mom and Dad were somewhere across town pretending everything was fine. Preston was in his studio apartment learning how spreadsheets work. The silence from that side of my life was complete. At the end of the night, as the last guests hugged me goodbye and the staff started stacking chairs, Grandma pulled me into the longest hug she'd given me since I was 10. "You did it, sweetheart," she whispered. "You built the life they said you didn't deserve. And look, it's beautiful." I looked around at the empty tables, the leftover cake, the city lights still twinkling below us, and I knew she was right. Family isn't blood. It's the people who stay when you stop having anything left to give them. And mine was finally perfectly mine.